With winter fast approaching and snowstorms predicted, it's important to consider ways to protect your plants and crops from the colder conditions. Imagine waking up on a cold morning to discover that your greenhouse has turned into a frozen wasteland. The power's been out for hours, and without heat, your crops, months of hard work, are now withered and lifeless. All that effort gone in the blink of an eye. So, how do you protect your crops from winter's worst? The answer lies in a time-tested method straight from the Amish way of life. While we're out here Googling the best ways to insulate a greenhouse, they're busy cutting wood and figuring out how to heat a space with nothing but the sun, some compost, and maybe a few natural materials you wouldn't expect. What's impressive is not just that they do it, but how they do it. Buckle up, or harness up if we're staying true to Amish tradition, because we're about to explore how these farmers work with nature, and not against it, to keep their crops thriving when the weather outside looks more like a freezer than a field. Let's get right into it. According to the Amish, when you're trying to heat a greenhouse without electricity, your best bet is to go for the original, tried and true heat source, the sun. No monthly bill, no wires, and it's been warming things up for billions of years, so it's got some pretty solid street cred. The Amish know this well, and they've perfected the art of getting the most out of our big, glowing ball of fire in the sky. First things first, you need to learn about placement. The Amish don't just plop their greenhouses down wherever they feel like it. No, sir. They've got a strategy. They know the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, so they orient their greenhouses to face the southern sky, maximizing the amount of sunlight that can pour in during the day. This is called passive solar heating, which basically means using the sun's energy without any extra help from fancy machines. And this is what you should be doing, too. Now, I know what you're thinking. Sure, the sun's great, but what about when it's the middle of winter and daylight lasts about as long as a TV commercial break? That's where greenhouse design comes in. The Amish don't just rely on direct sunlight. They build their greenhouses with materials that trap and hold heat. Think of it like wearing a good winter coat. Once you've warmed up, that coat keeps you toasty for hours, even after the heat source, in this case, the sun, has checked out for the day. Most Amish greenhouses are made from materials like glass or clear plastic, which allows sunlight to stream in during the day. The sun's rays hit the ground, the plants, the pots, anything in the greenhouse, and all that stuff starts to absorb heat. It's kind of like when you leave your car parked in the sun, and when you get back inside, it feels like you've just opened the door to a sauna. That's exactly what the Amish are going for, minus the sweaty seatbelt. Greenhouses designed with passive solar heating can reduce heating costs by up to 50%, even in colder climates. That's right, half the cost, just by putting your greenhouse in the right spot and using the right materials. Now, if only finding a good deal on car insurance was that simple. When designing your greenhouse, try to make the most out of the sunlight you can get, just like the Amish. They often add features like angled roofs to catch more rays, or double-layered walls to trap heat like a warm thermos. It's like they're turning their greenhouse into a sun-powered oven. This is a trick that's bound to make sure your veggies get more sun than the average office worker in winter. Now, don't think it's all about sunny days and warm afternoons. Even on cloudy days, Amish greenhouses are designed to pull in what little light there is and make it count. The thing is, you don't need full sun to keep things warm. Just a little bit goes a long way when you've built your greenhouse to take advantage of every photon that comes through. It's like squeezing every last drop out of a tube of toothpaste. The Amish have got it down to a science. So, next time you see the sun peeking through the clouds, think like the Amish and ask yourself, how can I make this thing work for me? The answer? Build smarter, not harder. And wear sunscreen. Always wear sunscreen. Next up in being smart and efficient like the Amish when it comes to heating up your greenhouses, without the need for electricity, lies in mastering thermal mass. Now, I know that sounds a bit too much like something from your high school physics class, but stick with me. This is one of the coolest tricks the Amish use to keep their greenhouses warm without ever flipping a switch. And I promise, there's no test at the end. So, what exactly is thermal mass? In simple terms, it's when you use materials like water, stone, or bricks to absorb heat during the day, then slowly release that heat at night when things get chilly. Imagine it like the world's most patient heating system. It's a bit like baking cookies. You preheat the oven, and long after the oven's off, the kitchen still feels nice and warm. Not to mention smells amazing. Well, except this time, it's your greenhouse that stays warm. And no, sadly, there aren't any cookies involved. The Amish are pros at this. Just like them, you can fill your greenhouses with materials that store up heat like squirrels storing nuts for winter. Stone floors, walls made of brick, and even big barrels of water all act like little solar-powered batteries. During the day, the sun shines in, and these materials soak up all that lovely warmth. When the temperature drops at night, they start releasing the heat, keeping the plants cozy even when it's freezing outside. It's kind of like giving your greenhouse a heated blanket, but one that doesn't need to be plugged in. Here's a little Amish secret. Water is one of the best materials for thermal mass. It has a high heat capacity, which is just a fancy way of saying it can absorb a ton of heat without getting too hot too fast. You can learn something from the Amish farmers, and make sure to line the walls of your greenhouse with barrels of water to maximize this effect. Think of them like mini heat reservoirs. A 55-gallon water barrel can hold enough heat to keep a small greenhouse warm through a chilly night. That's some pretty good mileage for something as simple as water. It's not just water. You can also make use of heavy materials like stone or brick, which absorb heat from the sun during the day and release it slowly overnight. If you ever walk into an Amish greenhouse, you'll likely see stone pathways or thick, dark bricks lining the walls. It's not just for looks, either. Those materials are doing some serious work behind the scenes, keeping the temperature steady like the reliable grandpa of greenhouse heating. Did you know that for every square foot of thermal mass in a greenhouse, you can reduce the need for extra heating by up to 15% just by adding a little bit of stone or a few barrels of water? In a world where heating bills can run as high as the electric company's Christmas bonuses, that's some seriously good news. However, one thing you have to keep in mind is that it's not just about tossing in any old materials. The key to thermal mass, as said earlier on, is using materials that can absorb a lot of heat during the day and release it slowly at night. Dark-colored materials work best because they absorb more sunlight, kind of like how your black t-shirt feels 10 times hotter than your white one on a sunny day. So, like the Amish, it's best to opt for dark stones, bricks, or even large dark clay pots. These not only look great in a greenhouse, but do double duty by helping to regulate the temperature. Thermal mass is like that one friend who's always cold and keeps every blanket in the house, but then ends up warming the whole room. You're annoyed at first, but then you realize you're all benefiting from their blanket hoarding. It's the same with these stones and water barrels. They take all the heat during the day, but they're generous enough to share it with everyone later. So, next time you're thinking about heating your greenhouse, let your stones and water do the work. It's efficient, eco-friendly, and most importantly, it works. Another one of the Amish community's more natural heating solutions is compost. Now, if you're picturing piles of smelly, decomposing vegetables, hold that thought. When done correctly, composting can be a surprisingly effective and sustainable way to generate heat. And the best part? It's the ultimate example of recycling. I mean, what could be better than turning last week's potato peels into next week's greenhouse heater? Composting works because of a process called decomposition. When organic materials like food scraps, leaves, and manure break down, they release heat. It's like a tiny bonfire happening inside your compost pile. Only this one doesn't require kindling. In fact, a well-maintained compost pile can reach temperatures of up to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hotter than your average cup of tea. The Amish figured out that if you place compost piles strategically around or even inside a greenhouse, the heat from decomposition will keep the greenhouse warm, especially through those chilly nights. Now, here's the trick. You can't just dump any old thing into a pile and expect it to heat your greenhouse. Composting is a delicate balance, and the Amish have this down to an art. The right mix of greens, like kitchen scraps and grass clippings, and browns, like dried leaves and straw, creates the perfect environment for microbes to start breaking things down. The heat is generated as these little guys get to work, and it can be used to keep the inside of the greenhouse at a steady temperature. It's kind of like having a bunch of tiny workers tirelessly churning out warmth day and night. One key composting technique you can learn from the Amish is placing compost piles along the perimeter of the greenhouse. Think of these piles like a natural heat barrier. As the material breaks down, the warmth seeps into the greenhouse walls and keeps the space from getting too cold. You can go a step further and actually build compost bins within your greenhouse. That way, your plants get the added bonus of being directly warmed by the process, almost like having a heater built right into the room. And don't worry about the smell. If your compost pile is giving off an odor, something's not quite right. A properly managed compost pile should smell earthy, not like a garbage dump. Trust me, you don't want to walk into your greenhouse and be greeted by the scent of rotting food. To keep things sweet-smelling, you need to turn the pile regularly, which keeps it aerated and helps the decomposition process along. The Amish make this a regular part of their greenhouse routine. Compost piles aren't just for heating greenhouses. Some enterprising folks have even used compost to heat water for showers or to warm up outdoor spaces. And if you're really looking to impress your neighbors, you can tell them your plants are heated by, well, vegetable scraps. Whether you're a die-hard gardener or just someone who wants to make the most out of your food waste, composting is a great way to heat your greenhouse. It gives you the added bonus of rich, nutrient-packed soil to use when the compost is fully broken down. It's a win-win. Warm plants and a natural fertilizer, all courtesy of Mother Nature. Plus, doing this gives you a great conversation starter. Did I mention my greenhouse is heated by cow manure? Let's face it. No one likes a cold draft. Not even your plants. The Amish know this all too well, which is why windbreaks and insulation are key players in their greenhouse heating strategy. And the technique is something you should steal. If you've ever been in an old house on a windy night, you know how a draft can cut right through you. Well, the same goes for greenhouses. Keeping the cold air out is just as important as keeping the heat in. Windbreaks are the Amish's first line of defense. They don't rely on fancy electric heaters to battle the wind. They use nature itself. Trees, shrubs, and hedges are planted around their greenhouses to block those icy gusts. It's like building a natural fence out of greenery. Only this one does double duty, providing protection from the wind while also beautifying the landscape. If you're thinking, can a bunch of trees really make that big of a difference? The answer is a resounding yes. Studies have shown that a well-placed windbreak can reduce wind speed by up to 50%, which significantly lowers heat loss in a greenhouse. That's a big deal when you're trying to keep a delicate balance of warmth in a space that relies on passive methods to stay cozy. Plus, a windbreak can create a microclimate where the temperature around the greenhouse is a bit higher than in open areas. It's like giving your plants a warm blanket of protection from the harsh winter winds. Now, windbreaks are just the beginning. The next step is insulation. And boy, you can have this down to a science if you follow how the Amish do. In the winter, you can stuff straw bales around the base of your greenhouses to create a natural insulating barrier. Straw might not sound high-tech, but it works wonders at keeping the cold out and the heat in. The air pockets in straw make it an excellent insulator. And when you stack those bales along the walls of your greenhouse, you've essentially built a fortress against the cold. It's cheap, easy, and you can even compost the straw when winter's over. talk about multi-purpose. In terms of quantity, a row of straw bales around the perimeter of your greenhouse is usually enough to provide decent insulation. Just make sure they're packed tightly. Air gaps are like leaving the front door open in January. For extra insulation, you can make use of wool or even old blankets to cover areas that lose heat quickly, like some Amish farmers. One of the oldest tricks in the book is lining the inside of your greenhouse with plastic sheeting. While plastic might not seem very Amish, it's actually a common and practical material in their greenhouses. You'll find clear plastic stretched over frames or double layers of plastic to create an air pocket, which keeps the heat trapped inside. Kind of like a makeshift thermos. If you've ever used bubble wrap on your windows in winter, it's a similar concept. Here's where it gets even more clever. Dark-colored materials. It's been established that the Amish often use dark surfaces or walls inside the greenhouse to absorb more sunlight during the day. When the sun goes down, those dark surfaces release the heat back into the air. So, while you might be wearing 5 layers of clothes to stay warm, your greenhouse is getting by just fine with a smart setup of windbreaks, insulation, and heat-absorbing materials. Who wouldn't want a windbreak of trees that doubles as a natural fence or cozy straw-insulated fortress? It's like nature's own home improvement system, complete with free heating. Next time you're battling a cold draft in your home, plant a tree, insulate with some straw, and let nature keep things toasty. It's a strategy that's been working for generations, and it doesn't involve a single watt of electricity. When it comes to keeping a greenhouse productive through the colder months, the Amish don't just rely on fancy heating tricks or compost piles. Sometimes the smartest move is choosing the right crops, ones that laugh in the face of winter's icy grip. Think of it like building a football team. You wouldn't put a fragile kicker out there to face a linebacker, right? The same logic applies to plants. You need the tough ones, the cold weather warriors. The Amish know that not every plant can handle the chill, so they opt for hardy varieties that thrive even when temperatures drop. It's like growing a garden of Clint Eastwood's, nothing phases them. Spinach, kale, carrots, and beets are some of the most popular cold weather crops you'll find in Amish greenhouses. These aren't your delicate summer tomatoes. These are the plants that can take a frost on the chin and keep growing. Here's where it gets fun. Plants actually have their own internal defenses. Ever heard of a little thing called frost tolerance? Some plants have built-in mechanisms that make them less susceptible to cold. Take kale, for example. It's one of those crops that actually gets sweeter after a light frost as the plant converts some of its starches into sugar to protect itself. So not only do the Amish get to keep harvesting through the colder months, but their kale comes out tasting even better. Frost might kill your enthusiasm for outdoor activities, but for kale, it's just nature's sweetener. Now, it's not all about just picking cold hardy varieties and hoping for the best. Another trick you can learn from the Amish is planting in succession. This means you stagger your planting so that your crops are always coming in at different times. By doing this, you make sure you have a continuous harvest, even during the colder months. It's a bit like making sure your woodpile is stocked up for winter. You wouldn't want to be left scrambling for firewood in the middle of January, would you? With succession planting, there's always something ready to harvest, keeping the greenhouse productive and the pantry full. The technique of combining cold frames and hot beds to keep your greenhouse warm is a total steal from the Amish Book of Gardening, and it's something you'll need in the long run if you don't want to depend on expensive heating systems. Cold frames and hot beds are two simple, low-tech methods that have been used by the Amish for generations to keep plants warm during cold weather. According to the Amish Greenhouse Rulebook, if you place a cold frame on top of a hot bed, you'll maximize heat retention while also protecting plants from the cold air. The hot bed warms the soil from below, and the cold frame traps warmth from the sun above. Cold frames are like mini greenhouses that trap sunlight and hold warmth around your plants. You can build one using a wooden or metal frame and a clear cover made of glass or plastic. The cover lets sunlight in during the day and traps the heat inside, which keeps plants warm even when temperatures outside drop at night. This setup acts like an insulator, maintaining a stable environment for your plants. To make a cold frame at home, all you need are a few simple materials. Some wood for the frame and an old window or a sheet of clear plastic for the top. The key is positioning your cold frame where it will get the most sunlight during the day, usually on the south side of your greenhouse or garden. You can even add straw bales around the sides for extra insulation if needed. Once your cold frame is set up, it's perfect for starting seeds early in the season or keeping cold-hardy crops like spinach, lettuce, or herbs growing through the winter. By using this simple structure, you're essentially creating a protected microclimate that allows your plants to thrive while using minimal resources. Hotbeds are another great heating method that relies on natural decomposition to generate warmth. This technique has been popular for a long time, and it's still used today by those looking for a natural way to heat the soil in their greenhouse. To make a hotbed, you layer manure or compost under the soil. As the organic material breaks down, it releases heat that rises into the soil, creating a warm environment for your plants. You can build your own hotbed by digging a trench about a foot or 2 deep. Fill the bottom with fresh manure. Horse manure is especially good for this because it generates a lot of heat. Then cover it with a layer of soil. As the manure decomposes, it will create steady warmth that will help keep your plants cozy, even during colder weather. This method is especially useful for early spring planting or extending the growing season in fall and winter. What makes hotbeds even better is that, as the manure breaks down, it enriches the soil with nutrients, acting like a slow-release fertilizer. This means you're not only heating your greenhouse naturally, but you're also improving your soil quality at the same time. 2 benefits in one simple setup. Cold frames and hotbeds allow you to harness natural heat sources, sunlight, and decomposing organic matter to create a warm, thriving space for your plants. One of the core beliefs in Amish farming is the idea of sustainability. Did you know over 90% of Amish farms are still family-owned and operated? If that doesn't scream sustainability, I don't know what else would. These guys have been passing down their knowledge of farming from generation to generation, like it's a treasured family recipe. For them, it's not about doing something because it's eco-friendly. It's about doing what works and has worked for generations. These guys aren't subscribing to sustainability magazines or watching documentaries about climate change. They're just living it, day in and day out. It's like the old saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The Amish figured out how to heat their greenhouses without electricity a long time ago. And guess what? It still works. You know that one friend who loves to talk about their minimalist lifestyle? You know, the one who tells you they're so enlightened because they Marie Kondoed their whole house and now only owns 2 shirts and a fork. Well, the Amish make those folks look like hoarders. Their entire way of life is built on simplicity. And I'm not talking about the buy everything beige and live in a tiny house kind of simplicity. No, I'm talking about making do with what they have, using it wisely, and never wasting anything. Not because it's trendy, but because it's just the way they've always done things. Their greenhouses are often constructed using materials like wood and glass, built to last without needing a ton of maintenance. And here's where simplicity comes in. Instead of relying on electricity to keep things running, they use natural resources like the sun, wind, and yes, even manure. They've got a system that's as efficient as it is simple. This whole philosophy of working with what you have is kind of like when you're trying to fix something around the house, and instead of buying a new part, you jimmy-rig it with duct tape. Except, in the Amish case, their duct tape solution has been perfected over hundreds of years. They aren't cutting corners, they're just using their heads and maybe a little elbow grease. While most of us are out here figuring out how to cut our carbon footprints, the Amish are already living a life that's practically carbon neutral. It's like they've got their own invisible badge of eco-friendliness, without ever having to post about it on Instagram. Basically, the Amish heat their greenhouses with the same philosophy they apply to the rest of their lives. It's simple, it's sustainable, and it works. Heating a greenhouse without electricity might sound like something out of a pioneer survival guide, but the Amish have shown us that it's very possible. The trick is not trying to fight nature, but working with it. Make the most use of sunlight, stack thermal mass like pros, or use compost piles as nature's own heaters. The Amish remind us that you don't need fancy gadgets or high-tech systems to keep your greenhouse cozy, just a bit of know-how and a dash of creativity. So the next time you're staring down the barrel of a cold winter, take a page from the Amish Greenhouse Rulebook. With a few simple techniques, you can keep your plants warm, your greenhouse productive, and yourself smiling. In fact, I'd argue they're even better because, spoiler alert, no electricity means no electric bills. Why do Amish people not use the refrigerator and still keep the meat fresh? Imagine living without a fridge. Scary, right? For most of us, that's a nightmare. We rely on it for everything from last night's leftovers to our ice cream stash. But for the Amish, it's just daily life. They've mastered the art of preserving meat without a single spark of electricity using methods passed down through generations. And believe it or not, their techniques are so good, they could put your fancy freezer to shame. In a world overflowing with gadgets, the Amish stand out by sticking to old-school methods. No fancy tech, no refrigeration, just simple, time-tested practices. They are known for their self-sufficiency. But when it comes to preserving meat, they're in a league of their own. They don't just keep their food edible, they make it last and taste even better. I'll admit, the first time I tried Amish cured ham, I was skeptical. No fridge? Really? But the taste blew me away. It was smoky, flavorful, and lasted longer than anything I'd ever stored in my freezer. If you're thinking, meat without refrigeration must taste old or dry, think again. The Amish have perfected these methods to not only preserve, but actually improve the flavor of their meats. Salt has been a trusty ally in food preservation for centuries, and the Amish have turned this simple mineral into an art form. When it comes to keeping meat fresh, salt is nature's oldest preservative, and the Amish know exactly how to use it to their advantage. By rubbing generous amounts of salt onto cuts of meat, they draw out moisture, which is crucial in preventing pesky bacteria from taking hold. Moisture is the enemy in the world of meat preservation, and salt is the superhero fighting against it. Using salt isn't just about sprinkling it on the meat and calling it a day. There's a technique involved, almost like a sacred ritual. The Amish carefully select their cuts, whether it's pork, beef, or even chicken, and then they don't hold back. They apply salt liberally, ensuring every nook and cranny is coated. It's almost like giving the meat a luxurious spa treatment, minus the cucumber. Here's a fun tidbit. The phrase, "worth your salt," originates from ancient times, when salt was more valuable than gold in some regions. Roman soldiers were sometimes paid in salt. Can you imagine? Thanks for your service, here's your salary in salt. The Amish tap into this old wisdom today, treating salt not just as seasoning, but as a lifeline for their meat. When I first witnessed the salt curing process, I was amazed. I thought to myself, if I had to rely on this method for my dinner, I'd probably end up with a meat popsicle. But the Amish, they've got it down to a science. The end result isn't just edible, it's a flavor explosion. The salt seeps into the meat, enhancing its natural taste while acting as a shield against spoilage. The beauty of this method lies in its simplicity. While many of us are busy stuffing our meats into fridges, the Amish are letting salt do the hard work. And the best part? This technique allows the meat to develop a rich flavor that you won't find in anything that's been frozen. It's like a culinary secret passed down through generations, where each family has their own little twist on the classic method. However, relying solely on salt isn't quite enough to ensure the meat's longevity, especially in varying weather conditions or when it's being transported. The Amish are wise to this, and know that an extra layer of protection is needed. When it comes to preserving meat, smoking is a game changer. It does more than just add that irresistible savory flavor we all love. It works as a powerful preservation method. The Amish have mastered this technique, using smoke to further dehydrate their meats, ensuring they last far beyond the lifespan of fresh cuts. Walk into any Amish kitchen, and you'll likely find smoked hams, sausages, and bacon hanging proudly from the rafters, all lovingly prepared with a touch of artistry. The smoking process isn't just a way to infuse flavor, it helps create an environment where harmful bacteria struggle to survive. The combination of heat, smoke, and reduced moisture creates a hostile zone for unwanted guests. Interestingly, smoking can extend the shelf life of meat by months, and if done right, it can even keep that deliciousness intact for a full year. Imagine having perfectly preserved meat sitting in your pantry, ready to go for the next family feast. I once tried my hand at smoking meat, thinking it would be a fun weekend project. Let's just say the aroma wafting through the neighborhood led my neighbors to believe I was hosting an impromptu bonfire party. They came over expecting s'mores instead of smoked ribs. But in Amish homes, the smoking process is treated with a level of care that turns it into a delicate science. They know the right types of wood to use, how long to smoke, and at what temperature. Each detail counts, and the result is something truly special. This technique is not just about throwing meat into a smoky pit and hoping for the best. The Amish select specific woods like hickory or apple for that sweet, rich flavor. They monitor everything carefully to create a controlled environment that balances heat and smoke. It's not just a cooking method, it's a tradition filled with skill and patience passed down through the years. You'd think that with all this hard work, the Amish would have enough smoked meat to last a lifetime. However, they're practical folks and understand that sometimes you need an alternative. Not everyone has endless amounts of wood to keep the smoke rolling. That's where another ingenious technique comes into play. This method adds a sweeter touch to the preservation game and offers yet another way to keep meat fresh. While salt and smoke are heavyweights in the meat preservation arena, the Amish have a delightful trick up their sleeves: sugar curing. This technique combines the sweetness of sugar with the preserving power of salt, creating a unique blend that gives meat a sweet, savory flavor. It's particularly popular for hams and bacon, transforming them into something truly special. The process is simple yet effective. The Amish mix sugar with salt and rub it onto the meat, allowing the two to work their magic. The sugar not only enhances flavor but also helps to draw out moisture, just like salt does. This creates a perfect environment for preservation while imparting that mouth-watering sweetness. It's the culinary equivalent of a warm hug on a chilly day. You might think of sugar curing as nature's version of candy-coated bacon, only it lasts a lot longer than the stuff you find at the grocery store. The first time I tasted sugar-cured bacon, I thought I had stumbled upon a secret food group. It was sweet, salty, and everything you'd ever want in a breakfast treat. And the best part? It didn't just taste good, it was also a testament to how resourceful the Amish are in their methods. Interestingly, sugar curing isn't a new concept. It has been used for centuries, and its roots can be traced back to when people first realized that sugar could do more than just sweeten their tea. The Amish have taken this age-old practice and perfected it over time, resulting in meats that are not only delicious but also can be stored for months. In fact, properly sugar-cured meat can last for quite a while if stored in the right conditions, definitely a handy skill when winter rolls around. The balance of salt and sugar is key to this method. Too much sugar and you end up with a meat that's more dessert than dinner. Too little and you lose that delightful sweetness. The Amish have the perfect ratio down to a science, ensuring that every bite is a flavor explosion. This method doesn't just apply to ham and bacon, you'll find it on a variety of meats, each bringing its own character to the table. Whether it's pork loin or even some cuts of beef, sugar curing opens up a world of flavors. However, even the sweetest method has its limits. While sugar curing is fantastic for taste and preservation, it also leaves meat with a bit of a sticky exterior. To ensure this doesn't become a problem, the Amish often follow up with a drying process, creating a firmer texture that's a joy to chew. When it comes to preservation, the Amish bring out another powerhouse, vinegar. This tangy liquid isn't just for salad dressing. Its acidity creates an environment where bacteria struggle to thrive, making it an ideal choice for pickling meats. The Amish often turn to vinegar brines to preserve items like sausages and fish, giving them a flavor kick that makes your taste buds dance. Vinegar brining isn't just about extending shelf life, it also infuses meats with a distinct tang that can elevate any dish. The process is simple, yet effective. The Amish mix vinegar with various spices, herbs, and sometimes even a touch of sugar to create a brine that brings out the best in their meats. This method allows the vinegar to penetrate deep into the meat, helping to maintain moisture while keeping unwanted bacteria at bay. My grandma had a penchant for pickling just about everything, including veggies, fruits, and occasionally meat. One time, she decided to try her hand at pickling some chicken. Let's just say the result was an experience. The meat was, well, not quite up to Amish standards. It had that vinegary punch, but it was a bit too adventurous for our family. At least, she had the courage to experiment. What's fascinating about vinegar brining is how versatile it is. The Amish can tailor their brines with different types of vinegar, like apple cider or white, each bringing its own unique flavor profile. Depending on what they're preserving, they can adjust the spices to complement the meat perfectly. Dill, garlic, and peppercorns are just a few favorites that often find their way into the mix, creating a deliciously complex flavor that's far from boring. A little-known fact is that vinegar has been used for centuries as a preservative. Ancient Egyptians relied on vinegar to keep food safe, while Roman soldiers used it to help stave off food spoilage during long campaigns. It's amazing how a simple ingredient can stand the test of time and remain relevant even in modern kitchens. But vinegar brining does come with its own quirks. The high acidity can be a bit overpowering if not balanced correctly. Too much vinegar can turn your meat into a tangy disaster. The Amish know the importance of finding that sweet spot where the brine enhances the meat without overwhelming it. Their experience and tradition guide them in creating perfectly brined meats that are both tasty and safe. When it comes to storage, vinegar brined meats can last for several weeks in the fridge, making them a staple in Amish households. They often use these preserved meats in hearty dishes, such as casseroles or sandwiches, where the tangy flavor can really shine. The beauty of vinegar brining lies in its simplicity and effectiveness. It's a technique that not only preserves, but also enhances the flavor of meat, making every bite a memorable experience. Rendering lard might sound like a lost art to many, but for the Amish, it's a practice steeped in tradition and necessity. This age-old technique involves slowly heating animal fat until it melts, separating the liquid lard from the solid bits. But here's where the magic happens. Once cooked, that melted lard can be poured over cooked meats, creating a thick layer that seals in freshness and flavor. This method isn't just for show, it's practical. By encasing meats in lard, the Amish create an airtight seal that keeps spoilage at bay for months. It's like a culinary time capsule, preserving the meat's taste and texture while keeping those pesky bacteria out. In fact, rendered lard can keep food preserved for 6 months or more if stored in a cool, dry place. It's an impressive feat that demonstrates the Amish's resourcefulness in utilizing every part of the animal. I have to confess, when I first heard about lard storage, I pictured my kitchen looking like a grease bomb. Who needs Tupperware when you've got lard, right? But the Amish handle it with grace, using it not just for preservation, but also for cooking. Lard is a versatile ingredient, adding richness to dishes while keeping their food safe and fresh. The process of rendering lard is fairly straightforward, but it does require some patience. First, the fat needs to be cut into small pieces to help it melt evenly. Then, It's placed in a pot over low heat, allowing it to render slowly. The result? A beautiful golden liquid that's ready to work its magic. Those leftover bits? They're called cracklings, and they can be a delicious snack on their own. One interesting fact is that lard was once the go-to cooking fat before vegetable oils took over. It's high in monounsaturated fats, which are actually better for you than the trans fats found in many processed foods today. Yet, many people still have a bad association with lard thanks to years of health fads. The Amish, however, have continued to embrace its benefits, passing down this tradition through generations. This technique not only showcases the Amish's culinary prowess, but also their commitment to sustainability. By utilizing every part of the animal, nothing goes to waste, and they ensure that their food storage methods align with their values of simplicity and self-sufficiency. Plus, there's something quite charming about the idea of sealing in flavors with a bit of rendered fat instead of plastic wrap. In the Amish way of life, every corner of the home serves a purpose, and root cellars are no exception. These underground havens are not just for storing vegetables. They play a crucial role in preserving cured meats. Imagine stepping into a cool, dark space that feels like stepping back in time, a natural refrigerator that doesn't require a single watt of electricity. The constant low temperatures and humidity levels create an ideal environment that slows down spoilage, allowing meats to last longer without the need for chemical preservatives. My neighbor tried building a root cellar once, but he ended up with a muddy pit that only attracted more raccoons than anything else. The thought of sharing dinner with a raccoon just doesn't sit right with me. However, the Amish know how to keep their food safe and their critters out. With careful construction and ventilation, their root cellars maintain that perfect balance, ensuring that their hard-earned meats remain fresh and flavorful. In these root cellars, cured meats can hang freely, allowing for airflow that prevents moisture buildup and spoilage. Some might wonder how these unassuming structures can keep meat for months. The trick lies in the temperature. Ideally, root cellars maintain a temperature between 32 degrees Fahrenheit and 40 degrees Fahrenheit. 0 degrees Celsius to 4 degrees Celsius. This coolness combined with the darkness helps slow down enzymatic reactions and bacterial growth, which are the main culprits of food spoilage. It's a perfect blend of nature and old world wisdom. Interestingly, root cellars have been used for centuries, with many cultures relying on them for food storage. Archaeological findings show that they date back to ancient civilizations. Yet the Amish have continued this tradition, blending practicality with an appreciation for sustainable living. They're not just preserving meat. They're preserving a way of life that respects the land and its resources. And it's not just meats that thrive in root cellars. The cool, moist environment is perfect for storing potatoes, carrots, and even apples. Some families have been known to create their own mini food pyramids, stacking vegetables and meats alike, taking advantage of every inch of space. It's a bit like a treasure hunt. Open the door, and you never know what goodies you might find. While root cellars are incredibly effective, they're not the only tool in the Amish preservation toolbox. When winter rolls around, they have another method that uses the cold weather to their advantage. When winter arrives in Amish country, it's time for a seasonal method of meat preservation that's as simple as it is brilliant. Outdoor freezing. With temperatures dropping well below freezing, the cold air becomes an ally in the quest to keep meat fresh. Imagine a large chunk of meat, carefully prepared and laid out in the frigid air, essentially transforming the backyard into a giant freezer. It's like having a personal snowbox where you don't have to worry about electricity bills. The Amish have long understood the power of nature, using those biting cold temperatures to their advantage. After a successful butchering season, families often hang their larger cuts of meat outside. The cold air helps to keep the meat safe from spoiling for weeks, sometimes even months, making it a reliable method for long-term storage. I can only imagine the neighbors watching thinking, wow, those Amish folks really know how to make winter work for them. Of course, there's a catch. When using outdoor freezing, it's essential to be mindful of the weather. Too much snow or rain can affect the quality of the meat, so the Amish often make sure to cover their outdoor meat storage with burlap or other breathable materials. This way, the meat stays dry and they can enjoy the benefits of winter without any nasty surprises. What's even more fascinating is that freezing meat at extremely low temperatures actually improves its texture and flavor. The ice crystals that form during freezing help to break down some of the muscle fibers, resulting in a more tender piece of meat when it's finally cooked. It's like a natural marinade, thanks to Mother Nature herself. Let's not forget the playful side of this method. Imagine a scene with kids bundled up, running outside to check on the meat, probably fighting over who gets to bring it in for dinner. "I'll carry the ham if you carry the sausage," they might say, with a snowball fight breaking out in between. But let's be real, no one wants to make snow angels in the meat storage area. Probably not the best way to preserve the flavor. What's truly remarkable is how the Amish integrate this practice into their daily lives. They plan ahead for winter, ensuring they have enough supplies to last through the colder months. It's not just about preservation, it's about self-sufficiency and resourcefulness. As they prepare hearty meals for their families, they appreciate the simplicity of using what nature provides. Drying meat is as traditional as it gets when it comes to food preservation, and the Amish have perfected this age-old technique. It's all about stripping the meat of moisture, which inhibits bacteria growth and makes it last longer. Imagine hanging long strips of seasoned meat in a warm, dry place. Just like that, it's transformed into tasty jerky that can last for months. The drying process isn't just about preserving meat, it's an art form. The Amish know just how to balance the right temperature and humidity. They often hang their meat in well-ventilated barns, or even outdoors on warm, sunny days, letting the natural elements work their magic. With the right conditions, they can achieve a perfectly dried product that's ready for snacking, cooking, or even gifting to friends and family. What's fascinating is that this isn't just a way to make jerky. The dried meat can be rehydrated later for soups and stews, making it a versatile option for meals. You could say the Amish have their own version of meat multitasking. I mean, who wouldn't want a product that can serve as both a quick snack and a hearty meal ingredient? Talk about getting the most bang for your buck. And let's face it, nothing beats the satisfaction of biting into a piece of jerky that's been seasoned just right. Ever have a piece of jerky that was so tough you could practically use it to hammer nails? It's a culinary disaster. But the Amish version? It's full of flavor, perfectly chewy, and utterly satisfying. You can almost hear the taste buds dancing in delight. When you think about preserving food, you might picture jars of jam or fresh fruits lined up in a pantry. But the Amish have taken this concept to a whole new level with pressure canning, particularly for meats. They've mastered a method that allows them to seal meat in jars, ensuring it stays safe and tasty for years. It's like having a secret weapon for dinner. No more last-minute trips to the store for dinner supplies. This process isn't just for your grandma's peaches. It's a life hack for meat lovers. By sealing meat in jars and cooking it under high pressure, they create an airtight environment that kills off any bacteria and ensures longevity. It's a practical approach to food preservation, especially for large families or during harvest time when there's an abundance of meat to process. I remember my friend's family used to can everything during the summer. They had a whole shelf dedicated to beef and chicken that could probably survive a zombie apocalypse. Here's an interesting tidbit. Properly canned meat can last anywhere from 3 to 5 years when stored in cool conditions. That's longer than some of my friendships. It's hard to believe that while the rest of us are constantly checking expiration dates, the Amish are chilling with their canned goods, confident that a meal is just a twist of the lid away. The pressure canning process is quite remarkable. The Amish prep their meat, fill the jars, and place them in a pressure cooker. As the temperature rises, it creates an environment that not only preserves the meat, but also locks in its flavors. It's a little like magic. One moment you've got raw meat, and the next you're holding a jar of hearty beef stew ready to go at a moment's notice. I used to think that canning was an old-fashioned pastime, but seeing the Amish do it changes everything. They've turned it into an art form with families gathering to share tips, recipes, and stories while they work. It's not just about food, it's about tradition, family, and sharing a piece of their heritage. I can almost smell the sense of savory dishes wafting from those jars just thinking about it. While pressure canning is a fantastic way to ensure a long-term supply of meat, the Amish have a few more ingenious methods tucked away, especially handy when winter hits. When you hear the word pemmican, you might think of a fancy new health trend, but let me tell you, this is the real deal. Pemmican is an age-old recipe crafted by the Amish, blending dried meat, rendered fat, and sometimes even berries. Dating back to Native American traditions, it's a powerhouse of energy that's perfect for long-term storage. Imagine being out in the woods with nothing but your trusty pemmican. You'd be living the survivalist dream. I once thought I could whip up a batch of pemmican to have on hand for busy days. I pictured it as a delicious homemade energy bar, something I could grab on the go. Spoiler alert, I ended up with a gloppy mess that tasted more like regret than anything edible. Meanwhile, the Amish have mastered this ancient craft. They've got it down to a science. Each batch is like a mini miracle of preservation and nourishment. What makes pemmican such a fantastic food? Well, the combination of dried meat and rendered fat creates a long-lasting energy source. It's like packing a camping trip's worth of nutrition into a single bite. You could be out in the field needing something to sustain you, and there it is. A piece of pemmican ready to go. Just don't ask me to make it for you. I'll gladly leave that to the pros. Now, here's a fun fact. Pemmican can last for years without spoiling, especially if you store it in a cool, dry place. That's longer than my last relationship. It's packed with protein and healthy fats, making it the kind of food that keeps you going. It might not make the menu at your local restaurant, but trust me, if the lights go out and the world goes sideways, you'll wish you had a pantry stocked with this stuff. The Amish often incorporate berries into their pemmican, adding a little sweetness and a boost of vitamins. I remember when my neighbor tried to impress us with his version, he thought he was adding a gourmet twist by tossing in some chocolate chips. Spoiler alert, it didn't go well. But the Amish, they know just the right balance to create a product that's both nutritious and tasty, ensuring that every bite is a testament to their culinary wisdom. From salt to pemmican, the Amish demonstrate that you don't need modern appliances to keep your meat fresh. Their methods are timeless, practical, and a little bit magical. It's impressive how they've perfected the art of food preservation, relying on nature and traditional techniques rather than the latest gadgets. After all, who knew you could outsmart bacteria with a dash of salt, a bit of smoke, and some clever thinking? In a world where convenience often trumps tradition, the Amish remind us that sometimes the old ways are the best ways. No technology, no electricity. Why do the Amish survive in a world in chaos? While most of us panic by toilet paper at the first sign of trouble, the Amish community quietly goes about their business, unfazed by what is coming. But what if the grid really goes down and a collapse is waiting around the corner? How would the Amish be able to thrive while you are barely surviving? Let's find out. Let's start with food production, the cornerstone of survival. When chaos breaks out and the grid goes down, most of us will be racing to empty grocery store shelves like it's Black Friday on steroids. Within days, those shelves will be as bare as a politician's promises, and that's where reality hits hard. We've forgotten how to feed ourselves. Meanwhile, the Amish are kicking back in their fields, business as usual. They've got something most of us traded away generations ago, real farming knowledge passed down through families. We're talking about people who can look at a cloud formation and know exactly when to plant their corn. While we're Googling how to grow tomatoes, they're already harvesting their third crop of the season. Their farms are like perfectly tuned machines, but without any actual machines. Every piece works together in harmony. The horses aren't just transportation, they're living tractors that fertilize the fields while they work. Those chickens scratching around the yard, they're not just for fresh eggs. They're pest control, fertilizer producers, and garden tillers all rolled into one feathered package. The average Amish farm is a masterclass in efficiency. A single acre in their hands produces enough food to feed several families. And they do it without ever firing up a tractor or opening a bag of chemical fertilizer. Their methods might seem old-fashioned, but there's nothing outdated about results. While modern farms depend on a complex web of fuel deliveries, replacement parts, and computer diagnostics, an Amish farmer just needs his horses, his knowledge, and his community. Speaking of community, that's their secret weapon. When's the last time you helped your neighbor harvest their crop? For the Amish, it's just another Tuesday. They pool their labor, share their tools, and make sure nobody goes hungry. It's like they've been preparing for a crisis their whole lives without even trying. But having plenty of fresh food is just the beginning. What happens when winter comes knocking? Well, that's where things get really interesting. When the grid goes down, your freezer full of microwave dinners isn't going to save you. While most of us will be helplessly watching our food spoil, the Amish will be calmly accessing their time-tested storage systems. Food storage might sound about as exciting as watching paint dry, but it's the difference between feasting and fasting when winter rolls around. Most of us think we're pretty clever with our basement full of canned goods from Costco. But what happens when those run out? You can't exactly run to the store for more when society's gone sideways. The Amish, though, they've turned food preservation into an art form. Their smokehouses are like time machines for meat, transforming today's pork into next year's dinner. The smell of hickory smoke drifting across an Amish farm isn't just pleasant, it's the aroma of security. A well-smoked ham can last months without refrigeration, which is pretty handy when the power grid's about as reliable as a chocolate teapot. Then there's their root cellars, nature's refrigerator, and the original energy-efficient appliance. These underground storage rooms maintain a steady temperature year-round, hovering around 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Your fancy smart fridge might be able to order groceries, but can it keep potatoes fresh for 6 months without electricity? Didn't think so. The Amish approach to food preservation is like having multiple backup plans for your backup plans. Salt curing, pickling, fermenting, water bath canning, they've mastered them all. While we're wondering if that jar of pickles in the back of our fridge is still good, they're rotating through their preserved food with the precision of a military operation. But here's what's really impressive. Nothing goes to waste. Those cabbage leaves that look too rough for coleslaw, they're perfect for sauerkraut. Bruised apples, into the cider press they go. Even the whey left over from cheese making gets used to pickle vegetables. It's like they're playing a never-ending game of food Tetris, and they're getting perfect scores. Now you might be wondering how they manage all this without being connected to the power grid. Well, that's where things get even more interesting. No electricity doesn't mean what you think it does in Amish communities. Sure, they're not binge-watching Netflix or posting selfies on Instagram, but they've got their own clever ways of harnessing power. Remember when your phone dies and you feel like you're living in the Stone Age? The Amish are over here living in 1823 and 2024 at the same time. Let's talk about their solar game. While the rest of us are fumbling with complicated grid tie systems, the Amish have been quietly mastering off-grid setups for decades. Their solar panels might look basic, but they're about as reliable as sunrise itself. And those batteries they use? They're not storing power for the latest gaming console. They're keeping essential tools and equipment running smooth as butter. The real genius is in how they use their electricity. Every watt has a purpose. No power wasted on charging 20 devices you don't need or keeping that second fridge running in the garage just for extra soda. They're strategic about it, using electricity for workshop tools, dairy equipment, and safety lighting. It's like they're running their own miniature power companies, minus the monthly bills and random outages. But solar isn't their only trick. Those picturesque windmills aren't just for show. They're pulling their weight in the power department. And don't forget about water power. Some Amish communities have rigged up water wheels that would make your high school physics teacher proud. The best part? These systems don't need a degree in electrical engineering to maintain. When something breaks, they fix it themselves, usually with parts you could find in any decent workshop. Here's a mind bender. Did you know some Amish communities can generate enough power to run a small manufacturing operation? We're not talking about charging a phone here, we're talking about running actual machinery. The difference is, they control the technology, not the other way around. It's like they've found the sweet spot between rejecting modern convenience and embracing practical innovation. But having power is one thing. Getting around is another story entirely. When the fuel pumps run dry and electric cars become very expensive lawn ornaments, the Amish will still be on the move. Remember that last tank of gas scene in every apocalyptic movie? The one where people are fighting at empty gas stations like it's the last Black Friday sale ever? Well, here's a wild thought. The Amish are sitting back watching their horses munch on grass, completely unfazed by the fuel crisis unfolding around them. Transportation in a post-grid world isn't just about getting from point A to point B, it's about getting there reliably, day after day, without depending on complex supply chains or infrastructure. Your Tesla might be the epitome of modern engineering, but when the charging stations go dark, it's just an expensive piece of yard art. Even that trusty gas-powered car in your garage? It's got about 300 miles left in the tank before it becomes a really uncomfortable tiny house. The Amish, with their horse and buggy setup, have basically got a renewable transportation system grazing in their backyard. These aren't just any horses either. We're talking about carefully bred draft horses that can work all day without breaking a sweat. Your car might need premium gasoline, but their horses run on grass, hay, and the occasional apple. Talk about a sustainable fuel source. But here's where it gets really clever. And let's talk about those buggies for a second. They might look simple, but they're engineering marvels in their own right. Built to last decades with regular maintenance, these vehicles are the ultimate example of sustainable transportation. No planned obsolescence here, just solid craftsmanship that gets passed down through generations. The only emissions they produce? Well, let's just say it's organic and the gardens love it, but we haven't even covered the most important part yet. Something everyone needs. The secret to Amish water independence lies hundreds of feet beneath their feet. And it's not a doomsday bunker. Their deep wells, often dug by hand or with horse-drawn equipment, tap into groundwater sources that would make modern preppers weep with joy, while the rest of us are stockpiling water bottles that'll eventually leak chemicals into our drinking water. The Amish are pulling up fresh, clean water like they're running their own private utility company. Here's a mind-blowing fact. A properly constructed, hand-dug well can last for generations. Some Amish communities are still using wells that their great-grandparents dug. And when something does break, they've got spare part systems that would make a NASA engineer jealous. You'd be amazed what you can fix with old bicycle parts and some ingenuity. While we're waiting for the plumber to show up in his computerized service van, they're already back in business with a bucket and some good old-fashioned elbow grease. But wells are just the beginning of their water wisdom. Take their rainwater harvesting systems. Simple, but brilliant. A typical Amish farm can collect up to 600 gallons of water from just 1 inch of rain falling on a 1,000 square foot roof. That's enough to fill 7.5 standard bathtubs, all from a single rainstorm. And they're not just catching it in rusty barrels. They've developed sophisticated filtering systems using sand, charcoal, and other natural materials that would make your Brita filter look like a child's science project. The real genius is in how they use every drop. That rainwater isn't just for drinking. It's carefully allocated for different purposes. The cleanest water goes to drinking and cooking. Naturally less filtered water handles the laundry and bathing, and the rest keeps the gardens growing and animals hydrated. It's like they're running a miniature water treatment plant, minus the massive energy bills and complicated infrastructure. Natural springs are their ace in the hole. These underground water sources provide mineral-rich, naturally filtered water that puts bottled spring water to shame. The best part? No electricity needed. The water flows year-round, powered by nothing but gravity and natural pressure. While city folks are fighting over the last case of bottled water at the supermarket, Amish families are filling their buckets with water that hasn't seen a chemical treatment plant in its life. Speaking of healthy living, there's another aspect of Amish life that might surprise you: their approach to medicine and staying healthy without relying on modern health care. When the hospitals are dark and pharmacies are empty, most of us wouldn't know the difference between a healing herb and a handful of weeds. But in Amish communities, the wheat growing beside the barn might just be your next headache cure. Their medicine cabinet? It's their garden, and it's always open for business. The Amish approach to health is like having a built-in insurance policy that actually works. While we're popping pills for every minor ailment, they're preventing problems before they start. Their secret? A combination of hard work, clean eating, and herbal remedies that have stood the test of time. No copays required, and Mother Nature never sends you a bill. Take their use of elderberry, for example. When flu season hits, most of us are racing to the pharmacy for over-the-counter medicines. Meanwhile, Amish families are sipping elderberry syrup that they made months ago. Studies show this little berry packs such a punch against viruses that modern pharmaceutical companies are trying to figure out how to bottle its power. The Amish just grow it, pick it, and turn it into medicine. Simple as that. Their herbal medicine chest reads like a gardener's greatest hits album. Got a stomachache? Peppermint tea, freshly picked. Can't sleep? Valerian root does the trick. That nasty cough keeping you up? A mixture of honey and homegrown thyme will quiet it down. These aren't just old wives' tales. Many of these remedies have been validated by modern science. The Amish were just a few hundred years ahead of the research papers. But it's not just about treating illness. It's about preventing it in the first place. Physical work keeps them naturally fit without needing a $100 monthly gym membership. Their diet is packed with fresh vegetables, whole grains, and fermented foods that keep their gut health in check. When's the last time you ate something that was picked the same day? For the Amish, it's just another Tuesday. They've even got their own version of physical therapy. Those aching muscles from a hard day's work? Hot compresses and herbal salves made from arnica or comfrey do the job just fine. No need for expensive prescription pain medications when you've got nature's medicine growing in your backyard. But even with all these preventive measures and natural remedies, sometimes communities need protection from outside threats. And while the Amish are known for their peaceful ways, they've got some surprising skills that come in handy when times get tough. You could have all the food, water, and sustainable systems in the world, but none of it matters if you can't protect it when society breaks down. That's where most survival plans fall apart. They focus on stockpiling without thinking about security. The Amish? They've got something better than walls and weapons. They've got a community-based security system that's been working for centuries. Let's get one thing straight. Amish communities are deeply peaceful. They're not training for doomsday or plotting defense strategies. But hunting? That's a different story. Years of putting food on the table have made them some of the most skilled marksmen you'll ever meet. While the rest of us are learning to shoot from video games, they're teaching their kids the real-world skills of marksmanship, respect for weapons, and most importantly, when not to use them. Those hunting rifles they own aren't just any old guns, either. We're talking about carefully maintained, top quality equipment that gets passed down through generations. They treat these tools with the same respect they give everything else in their lives. No flashy collections or unnecessary accessories, just well-maintained instruments that serve a specific purpose. But here's where it gets really interesting. In a crisis, Amish communities become natural gathering points. Think about it. They've got food, water, sustainable power, and generations of practical knowledge. But when things go south, you will also have a lot of people that aren't going to be targeting Amish farms. They'll be trying to join forces with them. Their defensive strategy is simple, but brilliant. Be so useful to everyone around you that hurting you would hurt themselves. While we're busy installing security systems and cameras that won't work without electricity, they're building relationships that will last through any crisis. Their farms don't just feed their families. They feed their English, non-Amish neighbors, too. Their skills don't just serve their community. They benefit everyone around them. So maybe the biggest lesson we can learn from the Amish isn't about farming or food storage or even self-sufficiency. It's about building something that's truly sustainable. A community that's strong enough to weather any storm together. Formula for raising livestock without commercial feed, the Amish secret. Let's face it, most of us have it easy when it comes to feeding our animals. We drive to the store, pick up a bag of feed and call it a day. But imagine for a moment that the nearest feed store is miles away. And by miles, I don't mean a quick drive down the highway. I mean it might as well be on the other side of the world, because for the Amish, a feed store run isn't even on the radar. Instead, they've mastered the art of feeding their animals using what's right in front of them. No fancy bags of feed, no modern solutions, just good old-fashioned farming know-how. So how do they do it? Well, let's dive in, starting with the most common farm critters, chickens. These feathery little entrepreneurs are more than just breakfast producers. They're the stars of the show when it comes to sustainable feeding practices on Amish farms. Imagine a bustling yard filled with hens pecking around, proudly clucking as they hunt for their next snack. What's on the menu? A delightful mix of homegrown grains and garden scraps, of course. In an Amish household, raising chickens is almost like running a mini business. Families often grow their own corn, wheat, and oats, which serve as the main diet for these busy birds. Did you know that a single hen can lay about 300 eggs a year? That's a lot of omelets. With all that egg production, it's no wonder chickens have earned their place as essential farm members. But what happens when dinner is over? Nothing goes to waste here. Leftover vegetable scraps from meals, think potato peels, wilted lettuce, and even the occasional bit of bread, make their way into the chicken coop. It's like the ultimate recycling program, but for food, chickens are excellent at turning yesterday's dinner into tomorrow's breakfast. They love a good buffet, and the variety keeps them happy and healthy. Just imagine, one minute you're tossing out old veggies, and the next, you're hosting a chicken feast. Now, let's be real. Chickens can be a bit picky, but they're not exactly fine dining. Ever seen a chicken fight over a piece of leftover cake? It's hilarious. Those feathery friends will go to great lengths for a crumb of something sweet. And if you think your cat is the ultimate hunter, you haven't seen a chicken on the hunt for a bug. Chickens are nature's little pest controllers, gobbling up insects that would otherwise invade the garden. But here's the kicker. All those happy chickens contribute to something even greater than just eggs. Their manure is a goldmine for composting, turning into nutrient-rich fertilizer for the Amish gardens. Talk about a win-win. The chickens help keep pests at bay, produce delicious eggs, and their waste enriches the soil. It's like they're on a mission to make the farm as self-sufficient as possible. Now let's move on to the gentle giants of the farm. Cows. These big beauties aren't just lounging around. They're hard at work producing milk, and their feeding methods are a testament to the Amish way of life. If you've ever been close to a cow, you'll know they have a way of making you feel like the world is moving just a little slower. They chew their cud, blink lazily, and occasionally give you that "what do you want" look, which can be quite amusing. In Amish farming, cows are often fed a diet that's the envy of many a foodie. They munch on a delightful mix of pasture grass, hay, and specially prepared silage. Silage? That's just a fancy word for fermented grass and corn. Think of it as the cow's version of a gourmet buffet. It's packed with nutrients and helps keep these hefty animals healthy and happy. You wouldn't want to serve your guests leftovers every day, right? Well, cows appreciate a well-planned menu too. Here's a fun fact. A single dairy cow can produce an astonishing 6 to 7 gallons of milk a day. That's enough milk to fill several cereal bowls or make an entire week's worth of cheese. But let's not forget, keeping a cow well-fed is a year-round job. During the warmer months, they graze on lush green pastures. But as winter approaches, Amish farmers prepare by stockpiling hay and silage to ensure their cows stay well-fed through the colder months. Now picture this. It's a chilly winter day, and the cows are inside, cozy in their barn. Imagine the scene. While you might be bundled up inside with a cup of hot cocoa, these cows are enjoying a meal of freshly cut hay, eagerly munching away as if it's the best thing since sliced bread. And trust me, they can eat a lot. A single cow can consume about 100 pounds of feed a day. That's like you trying to finish a giant pizza by yourself. Good luck with that. Of course, feeding cows isn't just about what's on the menu. It's also about the presentation. Farmers often mix in some molasses or grains to make their feed more appealing. It's like adding a little extra flavor to your favorite dish. Nobody wants to eat plain rice every day. And if you've ever seen a cow dive into a feed trough with gusto, you'll understand why they're often referred to as the life of the barn party. But it's not all about the food. The Amish believe in treating their animals with respect and care. Cows that are well cared for not only produce more milk, but also have happier dispositions. It's a simple formula. Happy cows, happy milk. When you walk into a barn where cows are treated well, you can almost feel the good vibes in the air. And speaking of good vibes, let's not overlook the social life of cows. They have a pecking order, or should I say mooing order. And watching them interact can be quite the comedy show. There's always that one cow who thinks she's the queen of the herd, bossing everyone around. And then there's the one that always seems to be on the receiving end of a gentle headbutt. It's like a soap opera, full of drama, but with way more hay. Now, how does this connect back to the bigger picture? Well, the milk produced by these cows doesn't just nourish families. It's also a key ingredient in many local Amish products like cheese and yogurt. So when you enjoy that creamy yogurt, remember the cows that made it possible, happily munching away on their well-deserved meals. Next up on our farm tour are the ever-energetic goats. If you think cows are entertaining, just wait until you meet their smaller, more mischievous cousins. Goats are like the comedians of the animal kingdom. They're curious, playful, and always ready to turn a simple grazing session into a full-blown adventure. Watching them is like having a front row seat to a stand-up show. There's never a dull moment. One of the best things about goats is their ability to eat just about anything. Seriously, if it's green and it's within reach, it's on the menu. We're talking about weeds, shrubs, and even leftover garden scraps. Farmers love goats for their unique ability to clear out overgrown areas, making them the ultimate garden helpers. They turn what might be an eyesore into a beautifully manicured landscape, all while having a grand old time. Did you know that goats can eat around 4 to 5% of their body weight each day? That's like you munching on 5 cheeseburgers in one sitting. So, when you see goats happily nibbling away at the plants, just remember they're on a serious mission. With their keen sense of taste, they can actually select the tastiest greens. It's like they're little connoisseurs of the plant world. Now let's talk about their feeding routine. Amish farmers provide goats with a mix of hay, grains, and whatever fresh greens they can find. During the summer, they're often turned loose in pastures where they can roam and munch to their heart's content. But come winter, those tasty treats become a little harder to find. That's when farmers stock up on hay and prepare special feeds to keep their goats happy during the colder months. Goats are also great recyclers. If there's a garden with leftover veggies or scraps, you can bet those goats will be the first to clean it up. It's like they've signed up for the best job in the world, grazing and getting paid in food. And here's a funny thought. Have you ever seen a goat trying to eat a tin can? They'll chew on anything they can get their mouths on, so keeping the yard tidy is essential. One of my favorite memories is watching a goat named Daisy at a local farm. Every time I walked by, she would bleat loudly, as if she was calling me over for a chat. But the moment I got close, she'd dart away, only to stop and look back at me as if saying, "Catch me if you can." They have this way of playing hard to get that's just too funny. And let's not forget the social side of goat life. They're very social animals, thriving in groups. Watching them interact can be a riot. There's always one goat who thinks they're the boss, and they'll butt heads with anyone who challenges them. It's like a goat version of Survivor, where only the feistiest make it to the top. Feeding these little rascals not only benefits the goats, but also helps keep the environment healthy. Their grazing habits prevent overgrowth, which can help control pests and improve the land's overall quality. You could say they're like little four-legged gardeners doing their part to keep the ecosystem in balance. Now, let's dig into the next stars of the farm, the pigs. If goats are the comedians, then pigs are the playful tricksters, always ready to roll in the mud and have a good time. They might not be as cute as puppies, but these clever creatures have personalities that shine just as brightly. They're smart, social, and oh so hungry. You might be surprised to learn that pigs are incredibly versatile eaters. They're like the original recyclers of the farm, taking everything from kitchen scraps to garden leftovers and turning it into nourishment. If there's food that might go to waste, you can bet a pig will happily gobble it up. This makes them a fantastic option for farms looking to reduce waste. It's like having a compost bin that oinks back at you. In an Amish household, feeding pigs often involves a mix of grains, vegetables, and the leftovers from family meals. Picture this, after a big Sunday dinner, what's left on the table? You guessed it, the pig's feast. Farmers take pride in making sure nothing goes to waste. They're like the ultimate cleanup crew, and I'd like to think they appreciate the effort by giving their best piggy smiles. Let's not forget, pigs have a reputation for being quite intelligent. They can be trained to do tricks, solve puzzles, and even find their way through mazes. They're not just rolling around in the mud, they're plotting their next great adventure. A fun fact to chew on, pigs can learn to associate sounds with food. So, if you ring a bell before feeding them, they'll come running like it's dinner time at a fancy restaurant. Now here's something to chuckle about. Have you ever noticed how pigs love to wallow in the mud? You might think it's just for fun, but there's actually a practical reason behind it. That mud keeps them cool and protects their skin from sunburn. Talk about a built-in spa day. They've mastered the art of self-care long before it became trendy. When it comes to their meals, pigs have quite an appetite. A full-grown pig can eat about 5 to 7% of its body weight each day. For a pig weighing around 200 pounds, that's like you finishing off a large pizza all by yourself. But what makes feeding pigs truly interesting is their ability to turn scraps into delicious meat. It's a full-circle experience that benefits both the farm and the family. One of my favorite stories about pigs involves a family friend who raised them on their farm. They had one particularly feisty pig named Wilbur. Yes, just like the book. Every time someone walked by, Wilbur would grunt loudly as if demanding a snack. The funny part? He was known for his impressive ability to dig through the garden, sniffing out the best veggies before anyone else could get to them. He turned a simple stroll through the garden into a race against the clock. Next on our charming farm tour are the fluffy and friendly sheep. These woolly wonders might seem docile, but they have a unique charm all their own. Picture a flock of sheep grazing peacefully in a field, their gentle bawing creating a soothing soundtrack to farm life. But don't let their calm demeanor fool you. Sheep are full of surprises. When it comes to their diet, sheep are primarily grazers, feasting on grasses, clovers, and other tasty plants. They have a knack for finding the most flavorful greens, almost like they have an internal GPS for good eating. Fun fact, a sheep can eat up to 5 pounds of grass a day. That's like you trying to munch your way through an entire bag of chips in one sitting. Imagine the crunching. What's interesting about sheep is how they thrive on foraging. Instead of just munching on whatever's available, farmers often rotate their grazing fields. This practice not only keeps the sheep well fed, but also helps maintain the health of the pasture. It's like giving the grass a chance to take a breather, ensuring there's always fresh food available. Sheep really are the original lawn care experts, keeping the fields neat and tidy without needing any fancy equipment. In Amish farming, sheep are also a source of wool, which is another important aspect of their diet. You see, when sheep are shorn, it's not just for the sake of fashion. Farmers often feed them extra grains and hay to prepare them for shearing season, ensuring their wool is as thick and luxurious as possible. Talk about a beauty routine. Those fluffy coats are like nature's version of a cozy sweater, and you can bet the sheep appreciate the extra care. But what's life like for a sheep on an Amish farm? Well, they're not just grazing machines, they also have personalities. I once visited a farm where the sheep had names, and let me tell you, they were full of character. One particularly cheeky sheep named Fluffy was known for sneaking up behind people and giving them a playful nudge. It was like having a furry friend who couldn't resist a good prank. While they might seem simple, sheep are surprisingly social creatures. They thrive in flocks and can become quite attached to one another. If one sheep strays too far from the group, you'll often hear a chorus of worried bleats calling them back. It's a reminder of the importance of community, even in the animal kingdom. Feeding sheep also plays into the bigger picture of farm sustainability. Their grazing habits help manage weeds and promote healthier pasture growth. The manure they produce enriches the soil, making it ideal for growing crops. So while they're busy munching away, they're also contributing to the overall health of the farm. As we learn about these furry foragers, it's clear that sheep are not just cute and cuddly. They play an essential role in the balance of farm life. Their diet, social structure, and wool production illustrate the interconnectedness of animals and the land. Let's dive into the world of rabbits, those adorable little fluff balls that not only bring joy, but also help out in the garden. With their twitching noses and big ears, rabbits are like nature's little cleanup crew. They thrive on garden scraps and love to forage for greens, making them the ultimate garden helpers. Imagine a sunny day in the garden, and there's a bounty of fresh veggies ready for harvest. But wait, what happens to those slightly wilted greens or carrot tops that might not make it to the dinner table? Enter the rabbits. These little guys are experts at turning what could be considered waste into a gourmet meal. Toss some leftover lettuce or cabbage into their area, and you'll see them hop around in delight as if they've struck gold. It's like they have a sixth sense for detecting the best garden treats. Now let's talk about how quickly rabbits can multiply. It's impressive, and a little mind-blowing. A single female rabbit can have up to 12 babies at once, and can do this multiple times a year. So if you start with a pair of rabbits, you could have a whole furry family in no time. It's like a furry version of going viral. Families looking to grow their rabbit population find it surprisingly easy. Just make sure to have enough space for all those bunnies. Things can get hopping fast. Speaking of bunnies, I can't help but chuckle at the antics of a particularly mischievous rabbit named Nibbles. One afternoon while I was tending to the garden, Nibbles managed to sneak into my bag of seeds. Before I knew it, he was bounding around with a seed packet hanging from his mouth like a trophy. I couldn't stop laughing as he tried to figure out how to open it, looking like he was plotting his next big meal. Who knew rabbits could have such a flair for drama? On a more serious note, raising rabbits can be a sustainable choice for families. They don't require much space, making them perfect for small homesteads or backyards. By feeding them garden scraps and foraged greens, families can reduce waste while producing healthy meat. Rabbit meat is lean and packed with nutrients, which is a fantastic addition to the dinner table. Plus, with their rapid reproduction, it's a great way to enhance local food sources without a huge investment. Now let's gallop over to the noble horses. These magnificent creatures are more than just beautiful to look at. They've been partners in farming for centuries. Picture a picturesque scene of a horse plowing a field or trotting down a sunny lane. It's hard not to be enchanted by their grace and strength. Horses have a diet that's as hardy as they are. They primarily eat grass, hay, and grains. On many Amish farms, you might find horses enjoying a feast of fresh hay after a hard day's work. The best part? Horses are picky eaters, and they tend to nibble at their food in a way that can be quite entertaining. Watching a horse carefully select the best strands of hay is like watching someone at a buffet trying to decide between all their favorite dishes. Let's not forget how essential horses are for farm tasks. They can pull plows, transport goods, and even help with planting. In fact, a well-trained horse can pull up to 3 times its own weight. That's like a teenager lugging around an entire mountain of groceries all at once. Impressive and a little exhausting. I have a funny story about a horse named Charlie. Charlie was a gentle giant, but he had a little quirk. He loved to sneak snacks. One day, while I was feeding the chickens, I turned my back for just a second, and there was Charlie, his nose deep in the chicken feed. He looked up at me with big, innocent eyes as if to say, "What?" I was just helping out. I couldn't help but laugh. It was as if he thought he could be a chicken for a day. Horses also play a vital role in sustainability on farms. They produce manure that can be composted and used to enrich the soil, creating a natural fertilizer for crops. This cycle of nutrients helps maintain a healthy ecosystem on the farm. Plus, when horses are used instead of machinery, it reduces the reliance on fossil fuels. So, in a way, these majestic animals are also champions of eco-friendliness. The bond between a horse and its owner can be incredibly special. Spending time with horses can teach patience, empathy, and responsibility. I remember the first time I rode a horse, it was a bit nerve-wracking, but once I got the hang of it, I felt a connection that was both exhilarating and calming. There's something about being on the back of a horse that makes you feel like you're part of something much bigger. Next up in our farm adventure are the turkeys, those comical, plump birds that can really strut their stuff. With their vibrant feathers and endearing waddles, turkeys bring a lively energy to any farm. But these festive fowls are more than just eye candy. They play a significant role in the farming lifestyle, especially when it comes to feeding practices. Turkeys are natural foragers, and they love to scratch around for insects, seeds, and plants. Picture them wandering through the yard, pecking at the ground like they're searching for treasure. It's a sight that always brings a smile. Farmers often supplement their diet with grains like corn and oats, which are staples in the Amish way of feeding. In fact, many Amish families will mix in kitchen scraps. Think vegetable peelings or leftover bread, giving these birds a hearty, varied diet. You can almost hear the turkeys clucking in delight as they dig into a feast. Now let's not forget their importance during the harvest season. When Thanksgiving rolls around, turkeys take center stage. Families gather to celebrate, and the turkey often becomes the star of the show. Imagine a beautifully roasted turkey, golden brown and glistening on the table. It's the highlight of holiday meals. The traditions around Thanksgiving meals are steeped in history, and many Amish families uphold these customs with pride, emphasizing home-cooked meals and shared experiences. Speaking of traditions, did you know that turkeys have an eye for style? They can see in color, which makes them quite the fashionable flock. Just picture a turkey strutting around the yard, flaunting its colorful feathers as if it were on a runway. I once saw a turkey take a fancy stroll, and I swear it was posing for an invisible camera. Those birds have a flair for the dramatic. Let's wag our way over to one of the most important members of the farm family, the dogs. These hardworking companions aren't just pets. They help herd livestock, protect the farm, and provide endless loyalty. And when it comes to feeding them, Amish families don't head to the local feed store. Instead, they rely on a diet rich in kitchen scraps, especially leftover meat straight from the farm's table. Meat is a big part of what keeps these farm dogs fueled. After meals, the dogs are treated to the leftovers of whatever the family didn't finish, whether it's chicken, beef trimmings, or even scraps from a freshly butchered hog. Picture a dog sitting by the kitchen door, eyes fixed on the plate, just waiting for those leftover meat bits to come his way. I had a dog named Charlie who knew exactly when dinner was winding down. As soon as the plates were being cleared, there he was, tail wagging, waiting for his special second dinner of meat scraps. While meat is the star of their meals, these dogs also get a bit of variety with cooked vegetables, grains, and other kitchen leftovers. But it's the meat that really gets them excited. One time, I watched a dog chowing down on leftover chicken bones and meat pieces. It was like he had hit the jackpot. However, not all table scraps are dog-friendly. Just like everyone else, the Amish know that certain foods are dangerous for dogs. Chocolate, onions, and grapes are definite no-goes, and they're mindful to keep those out of reach. I once heard about a dog who managed to swipe a whole pie from the windowsill, only to realize halfway through that it had chocolate in it. Needless to say, that wasn't a pleasant day for anyone involved. These farm dogs play a crucial role beyond the kitchen, too. They're not just lounging around after a good meal. They're out herding sheep, keeping an eye on the chickens, and guarding the farm from any potential trouble. Breeds like Border Collies are particularly skilled at herding, and it's impressive to watch them at work, running circles around the livestock with precision. Their meals may be simple, but their contributions to farm life are anything but. In Amish farming, every animal has its own special role. From the cows that give fresh milk to the playful goats that keep things lively, each creature adds to the everyday life on the farm. These animals are more than just sources of food. They're beloved companions that are part of the family. How Amish families care for their livestock shows their values of sustainability, community, and respect for nature. Next time you enjoy a meal or see a farmer with their animals, remember the hard work and love that go into it. Each farm has its own story, filled with laughter and the connections between people and the animals that make life richer. Here's to celebrating farm life and the furry friends that make it all worthwhile.